go over there. Oh, there go my notes. And usually I'll do this. So I think I was actually should have looked better to double check that this is the right, that this is the same order, but I figured, what the heck? Because this is going to go a lot faster because I'm not going to be explaining every single thing. Quick timeline. What year was the world created? What year was the world created?
The world was.
So we count. Actually, sorry. Let me just give it to you. We count everything from creation, so that would be the year. One. Okay. Creation. When was man created? Two. All right. When was Abraham? So do you know when Abraham was born?
Let me just think. It's after the flood. He was born about, I want to say he was like 3,500 years ago, which would make it, what, 22?
35. Well, I'll give it to you.
Okay.
1948. Right, but this is on well, we now call the Jewish calendar, but we actually have a couple of different places where we start counting years. The other ones aren't really used anymore. One was they would count years. It's mentioned in Nach a few times about how many years from the Exodus. We don't use that one anymore. There was a when Alexander the Great invaded Israel, they took on what they called the Seleucid calendar, which also they don't use anymore. But for a couple thousand years, they did. That any document was marked in the year of the Seleucid. For the Seleucid time, which was from the rise of Alexander the Great. I'll tell you just that this is an interesting tidbit about this 1948, is in 2016 will be 1948 years since the destruction of the Second Temple. It's also going to be the year from the what do you call it? From the creation, they call this Anno Mundi in Latin. You know what? That's getting louder out there now. Anno Mundi, the year of the world. Okay. In 2016, the Hebrew year will be 5776, and it will be 1948 years. So if there's a significance, I thought this might be interesting because this is the U.S. was created in 1776. So maybe the whole idea. And when you write the Hebrew year, you do not put the millennia.
Okay.
So like we write the year now, in Hebrew they write Tav, Shin, Ayin. Let me think for a second. I bet like that, which is 772. We don't write the Hey out front, which would signify 5,000.
Okay, and the 2 You say yod
Is
or yod?
We usually say yud.
Yud.
Yeah, yud
Okay.
or
Yud.
I think yod is actually the correct. Is like the correct one. I think everybody says yud. But yud.
So why is that in there? The yud.
Oh, I'm sorry. These are not yuds.
Okay.
There's when in Hebrew when they do an abbreviation,
Mhm.
they call it a cheek, like okay, yeah, off subject, off topic. There are certain letters that don't exist in certain sounds that don't exist in Hebrew.
Mhm.
When they write foreign words and they want us to use that sound, so the way they do it is they write the letter and then they put a chick. A kind of related letter. So this is a tzadi, and there's a chick means ch. So like this would be cheap, cheaps.
Okay. Like
Right.
you talked about.
Yeah, that's French fries.
Mhm.
You also have j.
Mhm.
Right. You have
Mm.
George Bush.
Okay.
And one of the funny things that happened, this is like so off topic, but one of the funny things happened to us in Israel when we went 3 years ago when we first tried to use a GPS in Israel. So you want everything in English because like that's what you can easily see, recognize, and everything understand. But you cannot input streets and whatever in English. You can, but you have to guess what way they messed it up in the GPS in order to do that.
Mhm.
So they had don't write this down. This is completely useless.
The
Hamelech George, King
the
George
King-
Street.
The King George. Yeah.
King George Street, which if you
Right.
go and you talk to somebody who's English speaking in Israel, in
Mhm.
Jerusalem, which is where it is, they'll tell you, oh, you go to King George Street.
Mhm.
But J-O-R-J, you would have to guess that that's how
They spelled
they
George.
translated it to Hebrew, they put it in Hebrew, and then they tried to translate it back. There was a sign, this is funny, because there's a, when we were this time, there's a street that comes this way that ends at a T, right?
Mhm.
So the street going this way has two signs, right?
Mhm.
It says, there's a friend of mine who lives in Israel, and he collects like English misspellings and everything.
I see.
All right, none
Well,
of
that's
which is
one thing I
related.
like about like when you transliterate the Hebrew. It's like you can spell it any way
Any
you
way you
want to,
want.
and it's okay. Like Hanukkah, I think I saw like 4 different spellings. Of
Oh, there's at
Hanukkah.
least. No, there's about probably like 12.
So I
Yeah,
love
even
that because I'm not a good speller, and
Even
you know,
even Shabbat, you'll see, especially like more like classical English books, like books that were written like 50 years ago. We'll say Shabbat for the th.
I see.
There's there you'll see Shabbos, you'll see Shabbat, you'll see Shabbos with an O, you'll see Shabbos with an O and an A and an O, you'll see Shabbos with an A and an A, every combination.
Huh. I love that.
All right, so none of this had anything to do with.
Okay,
with
I'm
that.
sorry. I don't mean to get you
So-
on track.
All right, so now, how old is Abraham when he has Yitzchak?
He's 100.
What year would that be?
That would be 1848.
No, add 100. This is when he's born. This is when Abraham was born. This is all the numbers. The great thing about starting with creation is you never have a BC. You never have to go backwards.
Oh, okay.
Negative numbers.
Okay, so 2048 then. Huh?
Exactly. What day was Yitzchak born? Do you know?
The day? Like day of the week or?
Nope, day on the Jewish calendar.
I'll say the 1st of Tishri.
No. That's not a bad guess, I guess. But it was actually the 15th of Nisan, which has another name that we know better
That's
as Passover.
Pesach.
Yeah, Pesach. Right?
Yes.
Now, when Abraham is promised that his children will be in exile well, actually, what he says is they'll be they'll be strangers in a land that's not theirs, and they will serve another nation for 400 years. That does not mean that they had to be enslaved for 400 years and be in Egypt for 400 years. As long as they're in a land that's not theirs, it counts as being, and they're descendants of Abraham, that counts as being part of the 400 years. So what's called the Brit Ben Bitarim, the covenant between the parts, when Abraham has a dream about about his children going into exile. So so it says your children will be in this land that's not theirs for 400 years. That actually starts with the birth of Yitzchak. So exactly 400 years from that, right? So the covenant between the parts is actually 30 years before Yitzchak's birth. The Exodus then is 400 years to the day after Yitzchak's birth, which would be
2448.
Very good. You didn't even go here. Okay, so that is Exodus.
Exodus.
Right. Also on the 15th of Nisan, which was also happened to be a Thursday. Now, 50 days later, rather, the Torah is given. There's actually a little bit of dispute because every month in the Jewish calendar is decided based on, it's based on the moon. But then you can add a month. You can add they can make it an extra day if they want to, and they have to in order to get everything to come out equal, because the lunar cycle is 29.5 days, and then we add an extra month every few years to make it all come out even, so that the main goal is that Pesach, it says it should be, this is the holiday of the spring, it has to stay in the spring. So what happens is there is a dispute about whether it was but I think the generally accepted, what I always hear is the 6th of Nisan, 6th of Sivan. Everybody agrees it was 50 days after the 15th of Nisan.
Right.
Right? And is the giving of the Torah. Now I'm going to put you on the spot. If you ask a Christian, devout Christian, what is the most important day in the history of man, what would he say?
It would be Resurrection Day.
Okay, great. Resurrection Day. When did that happen?
Well, that happened during the
No, I mean month and year. Month, day, and year.
It would have happened.
Any calendar.
I know. Just let me
pick any
think.
calendar.
I'll say it's going to be a Nisan, and it would be.
All right, let's say it's Nisan.
The 25th of Nisan.
The 25th of Nisan.
That's what I'm saying. Guessing.
Okay. You know about the whole Last Supper? What was the Last Supper supposed to be?
The Pesach Seder.
Right. So when would that have happened?
Well, Pesach is the 15th of Nisan, right? And so Jesus was there doing the Seder. We're talking
right.
about
so that
Resurrection
would be the 15th
Day, right?
15th of Nisan.
Right. But he was there a week before he was killed, so I did 7 days and I added 3.
No. Right, but the Last Supper, I think, is supposed to have happened the night before.
Why were they having the Seder? It was on
No, the night before
Pesach?
the night before the crucifixion. The night before the crucifixion is supposed to be the Passover Seder.
That's correct.
Right.
But he was there. I've always been told he was there a week in Jerusalem.
Prior to Passover or
Yeah,
something.
okay, so then we'll say 18.
Okay. All right. So It works out easier if I. So then let's go. Let's make the math easier.
Okay.
Let's say the crucifixion. When was the crucifixion? Because the crucifixion and resurrection are tied, right? 3 days.
Right.
So okay, so you know one, you know the other. It's fine. So crucifixion. When would the crucifixion have been?
Well, then it would have been the 16th, right?
Okay. Now I wish I hadn't started down this road. There's a dispute between the Gospels. It's either the 14th of Nisan or it's the 15th of Nisan, and it depends on which Gospel you hold like.
It's either the 14th or
That's what it would say.
15th.
Huh? Right. In John, it says that he was crucified during the preparation day for the Passover, right? And I think it even says, I believe it even says, as they were slaughtering the lambs or something like that. But this whole motif is it's the lamb, right? It's similar to the Paschal lamb. We sacrifice the lamb on the 14th of Nisan in the afternoon, right? Because in 15th at dark, right? You start the Seder.
Seder. So you
and
got
your
to have
lamb is
all that
cooking.
done.
Your lamb is cooking,
Okay.
right? On a spit outside.
Okay.
So on the 14th of Nisan,
Is the preparation day?
is the day. Well, he says it's the preparation day, so it's not, but it means it's before 15th,
Right. Okay.
right?
Right.
So it would seem to be the 14th. The preparation day for Passover would be the 14th,
Okay.
right?
Right.
He says that's when he's crucified. All the other Gospels say that the Last Supper was the Pesach Seder, which would happen on the 15th of Nisan, and then the next morning is also the 15th of Nisan, right?
Right. So
And
it would have
therefore,
been on the 15th.
if he's crucified in the afternoon, that's the 15th of Nisan.
Okay.
So, okay, so now we've got that there's actually there's a disagreement between the Gospels of which day. Now, which year?
I'm going to say. All these.
I'll make it easy.
I know.
You can say whatever you want because
Okay.
nobody agrees.
All right.
Nobody has any idea.
Okay.
I had a guy in here last time said 30-ish.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, 30-ish.
Well, I
It's-
mean but it would be like
This is-
33 CE.
To us, this is the most important day in history, is the giving of the Torah.
Okay.
And everybody knows it was 2448. Everybody knows it was 50 days from the 15th of Nisan.
Okay.
And whether you count that day as the 6th or the 7th, that's a dispute. But
Okay.
but we know what day it was.
So that's the most important day.
This is definitely the most important day in
Jewish.
history, in the history of mankind, is the giving of the Torah. Is the whole point. Rashi says that he's quoting older sources, but he says that when if you look through the days of creation in Bereshit at the beginning, it says, first of all, it says an interesting thing. It says Yom Echad, right? The first day it ends with, Vayir Vayiboker Yom Echad, right? So that's a day of one, or day one, right? Not first, but day of one, or day one. The next day, it starts out Sheni, Shlishi, second, third, fourth, fifth. When it gets to sixth, it says Hashishi, the sixth day. The Ha is kind of superfluous, but why is it there? So Rashi says it's because of this sixth, the sixth of Sivan, because the whole point of creation is that we get to the point where we get the Torah.
Okay.
So I assume you already have all this, but Abraham has two sons, Yitzchak and Yishmael. Yishmael is generally associated with the Arabs and Islam. Yitzchak has two sons, Esav, called Esau, and Yaakov, right? All of Yaakov's sons are Jewish. We say our answers are Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are the forefathers, Abraham's son Ishmael does not become part of the Jewish nation. Yitzchak's son, and eventually Abraham had several other children later in life, but none of them become. I was hoping to have the Chinese guy here because it says that Abraham sent them away with gifts. With gifts, he sent them away to the east, and there's a theory that this is where all the Eastern religions come from: Buddhism and Shintoism, and all the religions in the East.
So they come from Abraham.
Come from Abraham's children who he sent away at the end of his life.
And it obviously happened after Yitzhak.
So what happened was, right, so after Sarah's passed away already, then it says Abraham married Keturah, who the sages identify as actually remarrying Hagar, who was the mother of Ishmael. And that's when he had all these other children. And then when he died, he gave them gifts, but he sent them out of the land of Israel.
Okay.
So you have Esav and Yaakov. Esav is identified in by the Jewish sages as the progenitor of the Western Christian world. So one of his descendants is Amalek, who is considered the arch enemy of Jews, of Jews, and anyone who comes out and tries to destroy the Jews is at least identified with, even if we don't know for sure bloodline and everything, that they are from Amalek. But for sure, if you read the story of Purim, which is the book of Esther, then you'll see that he was an Agagi. Agag is the last king of the Amalekites who was killed by Shmuel Hanavi, Shmuel the prophet, when King Shaul defeats the Amalekites and then brings their king Agag to Shmuel, and Shmuel says, "Why didn't you just kill him?" And then Shmuel goes ahead and kills him. Agag, it's a long story, but he has a child, and then eventually that yada 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 that leads up to Haman in the story from Purim. He's a descendant of Amalek.
Okay.
One of Esau's children, I believe, is Yavan, Greece, which is where pretty much Western thought comes from. Anything that we have, is pretty much founded on Greek thought. That's where we, even the fact that we have a Senate in the United States. Why is it called a Senate? Because that's what the Greeks called their thing. You call it a republic. We got everything in our, and certainly a lot within Christianity. The New Testament's written in Greek. Why is it written in Greek? Because it's heavily influenced from Greek thought. Okay, so Esav. So this is this makes interesting some of the prophecies. Like if you look at Obadiah, who is a descendant of Esav, who converts to Judaism and then protects the prophets against Achav, the Ahab, and Jezebel. He has his own one chapter book, and he says, and I think it's one of the last lines, we say it every morning, is that saviors will go up on Mount Zion and judge Har Esav, the mountain of Esav. So somehow at the end of time, the Jewish world is going to go and judge, whatever that means, Esav. Who's Esav? We don't know who anybody is. But we're talking about the Western world, Europe, the U.S., the Canada.
What's the mountain of Esav?
It's called Mount Seir, and I was actually kind of wondering that recently myself. I think it's actually somewhere in the Negev or something like that. I don't remember. Oh, actually, there is the town of, I think it's also part of Jordan. It's somewhere like in that area, and I don't know which mountain it refers to. I've wondered that recently myself, but I hadn't looked it up. But the city of Petra was an Edomite city, and Edom is the other name for Esau. It comes from when he ate the food. Actually, it goes back to when he was born. It said that he was red and hairy at birth. So, in Hebrew, red is Adom, and so for Esau, he's known as Edom. So the Edomites, lived in that area.
Okay.
But more generally, it refers to the Western Christian world, and Ishmael refers to the Arab and Muslim world. Okay. Even though certainly not all Muslims are descended from, or not all Muslims are Arabs, for sure. Okay. So, yeah, that's a leftover from last time, but what the heck? We said before that these are the essential dates that you need to know for early Jewish history. Certainly after this, then we went into the desert for 40 years, and we came into the land of Israel. But these are the defining moments. Just a leftover, because I think it's interesting, is we talked about the term malach and malacha, and angels and having tasks. Mm-hmm. So, in the spiritual world, there is no physical, obviously, there's no physicality, right? So, in the physical world, you could have twins, let's say. They look exactly alike, but we know one of the ways we know they're different is because they're in different places, right? If you met one and then you meet the other one and stuff, you may not necessarily know that it's a different person, but if you see them both in the same place, they've occupied different spaces, right? So when we talk, we have a lot of anthropomorphisms that are not exact, certainly are not meant to be taken literally within all the Bible and everything. So so in the spiritual world, two beings are considered close the more they resemble each other. This is kind of where we were going at last time with how we're supposed to become more God-like. Two beings are considered close the more they resemble each other. And if they were to be exactly the same, since there's no physical distance that we could say, oh, well, they're exactly the same, but there's two of them, so they would actually be the same thing. This kind of, I think, to me it always made sense at least, that this is also when we talk about God, that God is one, because if you had two that were the same, then they wouldn't be two, they would be one. A malach, an angel, is a divine being. It does not have physical form of its own. It is given sometimes physical form. And we have the story of Abraham meeting the three angels, right? Have you ever wondered why were there three angels? We have lots of other stories where there's only one angel.
Bobby.
Hey, came for the refresher?
What? No, I saw you up here and I wanted to say hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, good. What are you studying?
Huh?
What are you studying?
It's the same course. I'm just giving it again.
Okay. So,
we're up to Jews and non-Jews.
Okay.
Do you want to come and sit down? Or are you
no,
going
I
somewhere?
actually have to meet somebody, but I just wanted to stop in and say hi.
Okay.
All right.
That's
have a
good
good
to
night.
see you. You too.
Well, one of
okay.
them was supposedly God, right?
No, not at all. In fact, if you read the story, it's completely not that way. Let me see if I can find it. I did not look this up ahead of time. I hadn't actually planned to talk about it. Actually, and I didn't write down there either.
Maybe they were the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.
That's an interesting thought. You realize from the outset that was wrong, but that's an interesting. I like your chutzpah.
I got a lot of chutzpah.
Okay, So it happened in the Parshat Vayera, which is Bereshit chapter 18. Right? It actually starts with verse 1. Okay, Hashem appeared to him in the plains. Let's talking him as Abraham.
Yeah.
Hashem appeared, which is what we call God,
Right.
appeared to him in the plains of Mamre, while he was sitting at the entrance of the tent in the tent of the heat of the day. So now, Now, Abraham is sitting in his tent,
Okay.
and who's he meeting with?
Hashem.
Right. He lifted his eyes and saw, and behold, 3 men were standing over him. Standing over is probably not a good, because he said he perceived, so he ran toward them from the entrance of the tent. So in other words, they were at some distance, but he saw that there were 3 men.
Mhm.
He's been meeting with Hashem,
Okay, in the
so
tent.
now he sees 3 men over there.
Okay,
So that one of those is God, he's already been talking to God.
right.
So what kind of sense would it make for one of them to be God in disguise when...
Well, that doesn't, but doesn't it mention further down that one of them's Hashem? Does it not? I mean, I might be wrong, I'm not saying it does, but I thought
Okay.
it talks
So
about
he actually gets them water for their feet, which is interesting because there were idol worshippers in the area who worshipped the sand on their feet. So he said, I don't want any idolatry to come into my area. Wash your feet off before you come basically onto my property. Then he makes them cakes.
And they eat meat and dairy.
Right, yeah, yeah. So the classic
Together.
explanation of that is that he served them dairy first.
First, and then you
Right.
can eat meat, what, 30 minutes later or hour?
You can really eat meat right away after.
Right after dairy?
Yeah,
Really? Okay.
yeah. As long as it's not hard cheese, but if you just have cream and milk and the calf he had prepared and placed these before them, he stood over them beneath the tree and they ate. That's a better question. How did they eat? But if you're an angel, I guess it's not so much of a trick. Right. So I don't know what you.
You see anything else about that?
Well, later on it says, okay, so the men got up from there, and then it says, and Hashem said, shall I conceal from Abraham what I do, now that Abraham is surely, okay. So Hashem said, so now the angels appear to have left, and now God goes back to talking to him, and he starts telling him about what's going to happen to Sodom. So the question is, okay. So he said, no. So what they say is, I know what you're talking about.
Because just 2 of them left, right? To go
so he said,
to Sodom and
so it says
Gomorrah?
Vayomer, right? So Vayomer Adonai imna matzati chen beinecha al na ta'avor me'al avdecha. So they often translate the Adonai as being the name of God.
Right, they translated
So-
Hashem in that
So
Tanakh.
right here where they always use Hashem, they say my Lord, because Adoni is in modern Hebrew even is which is the same way they spell it out. There's several words that you can use both to refer to God and to refer to people. Malach, like I was saying, can refer to an angel or to people. Elohim can refer to people. When Aaron comes to meet Moshe, after Moshe at the burning bush, and Moshe has just successfully argued with God, like, I don't want to be I don't want to go alone. He doesn't want to do it at all. He's like, let Aaron do it. And then God says, I think it's Moshe, you'll be Elohim for Aaron. I gotta look up the verse now. But,
Okay.
so this is one of them, Adoni, right? Or I guess also you could, Adonai would be plural, means my master, or sir, Adoni, Mr. We call it, Adon, whatever is Mr. So-and-so. Adon Weinman, something would be Mr. Weinman. So Malach cannot have more than one job, as where all this was going, and no two Malachim can have the same job. Because if they're created for tasks, then it doesn't make, first of all, if they could do the same job, they would be the same angel, in which case one of them wouldn't exist. If they they're always created for one purpose. So there's 3 angels, and they have, some of them last a long time and have like a purpose that's more general. So there are 3 angels. Why are there 3 angels? Have you ever wondered that? You know, when
the 3 angels here.
When Shimshon's parents are told that he's going to be born, there's 1 angel. When Hagar is at the well with Ishmael, and he's dying, there's 1 angel. So why all of a sudden there's 3 angels? For what? So the answer is they have 3 different tasks. One of them is Raphael, and they were all there as Mutant Ninja Turtles. Raphael's job is to heal. So Abraham is, why is Abraham sitting in the sun in his tent and it's hot out? Is because God made it extra hot so guests wouldn't come by. Because Abraham used to always wait out and welcome guests. He was the original hospitality man. God made it extra hot so there wouldn't be any guests because Abraham is healing from his circumcision, which happened at the end of the previous parsha. So it's within the first 3 days when it's very painful, and so God doesn't want him to be bothered. Abraham is so distraught that God sends him these angels. The first one, Raphael, was there to heal Abraham. There is also Michael, who is, even though the Jewish nation does not have a direct guardian angel the way that other nations do, where all of this is kind of a deep concept, but all of the oversight for that nation goes through that one angel. That's the angel of that nation. The Jews don't really have that. We do have Michael, who somehow is related to the Jewish nation in the celestial sphere, and
so you wouldn't say that Michael. How do you say
Michael? Michael.
Right. The archangel. He's not the protector of Israel. He kind
of is, but then we also get direct. And I've never quite understood the distinction, but we also say we don't have any intermediate angel. Like we get our what happens to us comes directly from God as opposed to like going through an intermediary. Right, intermediary.
Okay.
And so Michael comes to tell Abraham about the birth of Yitzchak and the pending birth of Yitzchak. Okay. The third angel is Gabriel, who is there to destroy Sodom. He's on his way to destroy Sodom, and he's going with the other 2 because, like, I guess at that point, it's almost as if God was debating, if such a thing could be said, telling Abraham, he came because he's going with them to destroy Sodom and the other cities. There were several other cities. Sodom and Sodom and Gomorrah were the 2 biggest. If you look at the next section in the same parsha, like the next paragraph after this whole thing happens, and Abraham argues, and it says the 2 angels arrived in Sodom. Raphael to rescue Lot, and Gabriel to destroy the city. So you can kind of see it from how did they go from 3 angels to 2 angels? The men turned and went towards Sodom, and then only 2 of them arrive. Okay. All right. All that was kind of an aside. I just thought it was interesting. The next part was Jews and non-Jews. As background for this, at the time of Abraham, up until the time of Abraham, so God has a lot, well, let me preface this with, God has a lot of plan Bs. The first one was, okay, I put you in the Garden of Eden, you don't eat from the tree of knowledge, you live eternally, have a nice day. You have children in the Garden of Eden and everything. You live a completely spiritual life, you fulfill the purpose of creation. God now has a being on whom to bestow goodness. The goodness has been earned. Everything's great. That doesn't work out. So he says, okay, so plan B is you go out of the garden. Now you have to struggle to earn a living. You have to struggle giving childbirth. You're going to still live a long time, and you're going to get back to the point where you're going to live in the Garden of Eden again. The idea was that anybody in the world could make themselves, the way the Kabbalists, particularly Ramchal, describes it, is basically think of it as you have a time of roots and a time of branches. So anybody could make themselves a root, and we could have had 15 different Jewish peoples. Now whether they would all combine to form one or something like that, I don't know. But the idea was anybody could join. Anybody at this point could have become an Abraham. And then if they had done that, they would have passed it on to their children, and all their children would have been part of this, part of the, let's say, saving of the world, the redemption process. God does not want to overwhelm people. That was the whole idea, that he doesn't want to just give it to you. He also doesn't want, if he give you this reward, he also doesn't want to stand over your shoulder. What is that? Yeah.
It's almost like a ship.
He doesn't want to he can't apply too much pressure, because if he stands over you and watches you, you don't have any free will. So he wants to create a people who are an example for everybody else. And so he needs a volunteer. So like I said, up until the time of, at least, it seems, I think until Yaakov, anybody could have joined. At that point it's cut off, and you're no longer a root. So it seems like if we had another nation that had decided, hey, we want to, we recognize God, we want to, be part of that mission, they could have joined, and they would have become their own nation, and you would have had 2 Torah nations or something like that. At that, and after the time of Yaakov, certainly, that gets cut off. So we see that originally, Yishmael, there was a plan for Yishmael and for Esau to become part of the Jewish people. I'm sorry, maybe not Yishmael, but certainly Esau. Esau was a descendant of Abraham and Isaac. He was supposed to be part of the Jewish people. But he had a choice, and he could take himself out at that point, which he does. After that, it goes through Yaakov. Now, what is the plan? So first of all, okay, you're the descendants of Yaakov. When the Torah is given, there's actually a chance for other people to jump on there. The only one who we know of, well, actually there are other people who jump on at that point, because when we left Egypt, we know we left with a mixed multitude of people who were not Jewish, who came and accepted the Torah at Mount Sinai. One of them becomes the blasphemer that's put to death. You also have Yitro and his descendants, Jethro, who's the father-in-law of Moshe. So they all become into the Jewish people, but they're counted as converts and stuff. They become part of the Jewish people as opposed to having their own nation that's also dedicated to the service of God. So the idea is that there's an example nation that has a higher standard, and that acts as, when God says you're going to be a Malchut Kohanim v'Goy Kadosh, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. He's talking about, in other words, we are going to act as priests, so to speak, for the other nations, meaning we bring their sacrifices in our temple, we teach them what they need to know. So the question is what do they need to know? So that's where we have the idea of the 7 laws of Noah. Also sometimes known as Noah. Although in Hebrew, technically speaking, Noah is a girl's name, Noach is a boy's name. Interestingly, I don't know why, Noah, which is actually, it's mentioned, one of the names mentioned in the Torah, as a girl's name, means movement, and Noach means resting. And that's a boy's name. I don't know why.
Can I ask you something
Yeah.
just a little off the subject of what we were talking about, the mixed group of people that went out with the Exodus?
Yeah.
Maybe I have a misunderstanding of what the term ger means. What's a ger?
Okay, so ger literally means stranger. Let me go back this up. Let me go back, and I shouldn't have done this first. Let's instead go into who is a Jew, who is not a Jew. How does that work? What are the different statuses? So, a Jew is someone, and is defined in Devarim. Did I write it down? Probably not. So it's someone whose mother is Jewish, and it's derived from a set of psukim in Devarim that I cannot find where I wrote it down. So basically it says that do not exchange, give your sons to their daughters, or take their daughters for your sons. And it says, lest your son
Like follow idols.
right, be turned away. I know I have it written down somewhere in this stack of notes that I have in here, and I was hoping it was one of these easy to find sheets. When I go back, I did edit out last week the stuff about Emory, so I'll just edit this out too.
I didn't go to Emory.
Just in case somebody sees it, you know. I don't want them storming the U.S. Embassy and yeah.
The thing you were so upset with last week where you said, oh, this isn't good, was it after you read something from the NIV translation? Was it because you read something from NIV translation?
Oh, no.
Was it because God's name was on there too?
No.
Or what was it?
There's another site that has like the entire Torah in Hebrew and stuff, and it's so what I did was to have the Hebrew handy and right there, I just copied and pasted it into a doc and printed it out. So I printed out Hashem's name all over it, not thinking like, oh, I shouldn't do that. That's what, it wasn't from the NIV, it was from something else.
Okay.
not it. Unfortunately, this is a mixture of several years worth of notes. I'm sorry, not several years, 2 semesters worth of notes. Plus, well, we're writing for this one. That's not it. Still not it. This is duplicates. Because it's really useful to see it inside. How do we get let me see if we can find it really, really quick, and if I can't, then I'm going to just give it up. Ah, good. Here it is. Yes, 7:3, Devarim. So he says, "You shall not intermarry with them. You shall not give your daughter to his son, and you shall not take his daughter for your son. For he will cause your child to turn away from after me, and they will worship the gods of others. Then Hashem's wrath will burn against you, and he will destroy you quickly." So, the wording here is very specific, as is all the wording in Chumash, especially in the first 5 books. You shall not intermarry with them. You shall not give your daughter to his son. You shall not take his daughter for your son. For he, who is the he here, will cause your child to turn away from after me. So, he is the son-in-law, right?
Okay.
So you have, Jewish parents here, right? And okay, now they have a son and and a daughter, and both of them go off and marry.
He marries a shiksa, right?
Right, and they we'll give them both crosses here. Okay.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's supposed to be Dala. I don't know how those things work. So now they're children, right?
Right.
And they have baby in diapers. They have big mouth open.
I'm hungry, feed me.
They have also, and this baby's also in diapers. Okay, so who's he? He's the
son-in-law.
He's the non-Jewish son-in-law here. He
Right.
will make your child. This is considered your child. Turn away, and they collectively will worship idols.
Okay.
So don't do it, right? What
Okay.
about them? They're not Jewish. This child is not Jewish. And right. So this child is now, I'm going to just mark him with a cross.
So basically,
Not
he's
that
not
the-
Jewish, so
no.
he can't turn away. Is
So
that what you're
cross
saying?
is not, yes, exactly. Yes, that's
Okay.
exactly. It's right. It's not turning away because he's not.
He's not
He's
Jewish
not
in the first place.
Yeah, he's not on the path in the first place. So you can't turn off the path. Okay.
Now, let me ask you.
So now I always say, does it? We only have one person in the class. I always say, does anybody come out of this class different than when they came in because of this explanation? Because sometimes you hear people
Right.
like, oh yeah, that means if your great grandmother was Jewish, then you were Jewish. If your like your mother's mother was Jewish, And I've had this happen. People say, yeah, I know I'm Jewish because my great-grandmother was Jewish, and I'm like, okay. I was doing a job interview. You know, like, I don't want to work here, please. Then you're Jewish. Then you're this one. If not, then even, you know, I have 2 brothers, both of them. So my parents are intermarried. My mother is Jewish. My father is Lutheran. I never converted. I'm just Jewish. I have 2 brothers. Both of them married non-Jewish women. Both of them have kids, and all the children are not Jewish.
Do they go to the Lutheran church at all, or where
No, my dad goes twice a year, I believe, or he did.
But your brothers.
My brothers, no, they. First of all, my brothers are still Jewish. You never.
Right.
Sure. Judaism goes by matrilineal descent, and you stay Jewish even if against your will.
Okay.
You can't get out. They say when somebody converts, because one of the processes of conversion is that you go into a ritual bath and you dunk your head under, that if you decide if you change your mind while you're under, just stay down. Because once you come out, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, that's it, huh?
Well, yeah, although we do, like, if we know that if we find out later that it was not, that it was dishonest at the time, then it doesn't count. Like if you went in dishonestly and did the conversion and then say, you know, look, I never meant it. I never intended to be Jewish. Then it didn't count retroactively. It doesn't count.
Okay.
But yeah. So I'm sorry, you were going to ask a question?
Well, I was going to ask, you know, some other things about just it being passed down from the maternal line. Is one, you always know who the mother is. That's the statement people make. You know. However, this is the basis for it, not the practical thing of, you know, who the mother is. Right, and then I also heard too, it's the mother that raises the children, and if the mother's Jewish, obviously, well, not obviously, but more than likely, she's going to raise the child in a to have a Jewish identity. However, there is a tendency among people to what we call paskin, to decide Jewish law based on these like ideals and ideas that they've heard. Not that the ideas and ideals are incorrect, but a child who is adopted and never converted, right, and is raised by a Jewish mother all their life, from the second after they were born until today, still not Jewish. If you have a Jewish child and he was raised all of his life by his father, he's still Jewish. So you know, kind of no matter what. Now we do conversions. We even do conversions for infants that are going to be raised in a Jewish family. You know, for instance, if you adopt a child from overseas, and you know, so you convert them right when you get them, and then they actually get to get out of it. They get to make the choice later on when they're adults. Also, if you have a whole family that comes to convert, then they do that, and then when the child reaches, it's got to do like a confirmation type of thing, or. No, it's basically they have to be informed that they can get out, and and as long as they choose to do nothing, then they've accepted it, and you know, it's considered sincere. One other thing, like if you grew up like a Reformed Jew, and then you wanted to become Orthodox, those people don't convert. They're Jewish. So
the issue with Reform is.
One of the issues with Reform.
Yeah, the issue with Reform, in regards to the Jewishness or non-Jewishness of any particular member, is that they don't follow any of the rules. So, if your mother, even if your grandmother, and this has happened, if your grandmother was born Jewish and during the Holocaust, her parents gave her to to non-Jewish family to raise, and the family died, and the grandmother grew up all her life thinking she was Catholic, but she knew okay, maybe she knew that my parents were originally Jewish, but she grew up all her life, being a Catholic. She raises a daughter, and that daughter goes through her entire life going, I'm Catholic. And then she has a daughter, right, who she tells, oh, by the way, your mother was born Jewish, but then she was raised Catholic. That daughter does not go through conversion. That granddaughter does not go through conversion. Even though she was raised the entire time as Christian, there's actually a term for it called tinok shenishba, a child that was captive, because throughout history, even up until the 1800s, the church would sometimes come along and say, your child is now Catholic, and send them to the monastery or whatever to be raised. There was a cardinal that was up for being pope who that happened to. Like, he was taken, I think, as a child and then raised Catholic, and then he was a French cardinal. He was up to be pope, but Benedict won. So it doesn't matter what you were raised. If your mother's mother was Jewish, then now it can get tricky when you have to try and prove that. My story, it hasn't been that long. Everybody's well aware of the facts, so there isn't, and it's a reasonable story. Other people, they say, you know what, there's enough fuzziness about your mother or whatever, or your grandmother. Just, if you want to stay Jewish, then go convert. In Israel, apparently, they recently made it very tricky to, and I don't know from firsthand, I've just read stories on the internet and stuff, and talked to people who said, yeah, that happens, they made it very tricky now to get recognized as Jewish by the Israeli government. You can get in, because to get in,
right, but to be an automatic
to
citizen.
get in, this person and this person, to get into, and this guy, under the law of return in Israel, can all become citizens right away.
The ones who aren't
Jewish, yes.
They can get in and become citizens.
Right. If you're married to a Jew, if you're the descendant if your grandfather, I think, was
so it doesn't matter if
Jewish.
it's the man that was.
Right. Now this is Israeli secular law in order to
Okay.
get citizenship in the country.
Okay.
This causes a big problem because they let in all the Russians based on this,
Okay.
and a lot of them, not all of them, there's certainly a lot of Russian Jews there, but there's a lot of them who their grandfather was Jewish, their father's father was Jewish or something like that, or they even lied to get into the country, and they're not recognized as Jewish, and it causes a big difficulty because in Israel everybody has to be married in a religious manner, however you say that.
Right.
There is no such thing as civil marriage unless you go out of the country and then come in married. So if two Russians who don't believe in anything want to get married, if one of them is Jewish and the other one is not, halachically, the other one's been living in the country the whole time. They may have grown up there and they may have been born there, and they served in the army and everything, but they're not Jewish. And then they're trying to marry somebody who is Jewish. So what they sometimes do is they'll go out of the country and come back civilly married. They'll go to a close country like Cyprus, and then come back married. I don't even know what they do if there's just two non-religious, non-Jews want to get married. But that's different. Sorry.
Okay, the reform. Getting back to the reform. So does the Reform Jew doesn't really have to?
So the problem with Reform Jew is it is not limited to Jews. The rabbi of the temple down here converted Reform rather, so he grew up not Jewish at all.
Okay.
Converted Reform, which doesn't believe any of the same things we do, and so he's still not Jewish. There's no way around that.
But you said he converted, but y'all don't.
He converted to Reform Judaism,
and y'all don't. Orthodox doesn't accept other conversions from other denominations.
Right, because if you convert to a religion that I tell you, you know what, you don't have to do any of the rules, you don't have to believe any of the same things, would you like to convert? Well, how can I say that you converted to that religion? If I could tell you, I'm going to, you know what, I'm going to convert you to become a Baptist. I know the Baptists don't strictly speaking, like they don't go through the same, but you know, I'm going to make you a Baptist. Now, yeah, believe in Muhammad. Don't don't, you know, Jesus didn't really exist. Believe in, you know, whatever. Vote Democrat, and yeah, you don't have to, you know, you don't ever have to go to, and don't ever go to church. Now you're a Baptist. Does that make any sense? I mean, like, forget about politics. Like, it doesn't make any sense. I've told you, you don't have to follow any of the rules. You don't have to believe any of the same things that we do. But now you're miraculously you become part of the religion. Welcome aboard.
So what if that person, I mean, has, you know, maternal lineage, you know, grandmother, mother, all that. They were Jewish, but they're Reformed.
Oh, so in that case,
is that a Jew?
So that's the same as if they were raised a Catholic.
Right, exactly.
So yes,
they're a Jew.
Like, yeah.
Okay.
I was raised Reformed. I never went through any conversion.
Okay.
You just start learning and doing whatever, you know, like
okay.
what you're supposed to. That's it. That's all there is to it.
Okay. So this. Okay. Gotcha.
Now there can be there. I shouldn't go into that. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. And we were going to talk about a ger.
Okay.
Somewhere.
So yeah. So in the Torah, there's a couple of things that are called gerim. For one thing, we are called gerim when it comes to being in Egypt. There's also another term that is not related at all called a gur chassid. And it's sometimes pronounced as ger, a ger chassid. Gur or ger is a town in somewhere in Eastern Europe, and one of the biggest Hasidic groups in the world still is it's them.
Okay.
They came out of that town. Has nothing to do with gerim. It's just the name of the town. There's another off topic, but there's a group called Satmar Hasidim, right? Also, they're not that big, but they're pretty prominent. Every Hasidic group was named after the town they came from. The town they came from was St. Mary's.
Okay.
They're known as one of the most right wing of the groups. A ger literally means a stranger.
Okay.
So when Abraham is told that his children they're going to be gerim, they're going to be strangers in the land that's not theirs. So that's what it literally means, and it's used sometimes in that respect. Although there's two ways we use it today. Oh, sorry. Really, today we mean someone who has converted completely. So you know, we have lots of them here in Atlanta. Someone who goes through all the steps. Now, in order to convert to Judaism, for a woman, there's the technical requirements, which I'm going to cover right now. Technically speaking, the actual actions involved are you have to dip in a mikvah, which is a ritual bath, and for a man, he also dips in a mikvah, and he also gets circumcised. In the Torah, there's a requirement to bring a sacrifice. However, since we don't bring sacrifices now, you deal with that when the temple comes back. So if you're a ger, then presumably when the temple's rebuilt, then you would be obligated to bring a sacrifice to finish but you're already completely considered a ger before that. There's no,
so
you're not partially done.
So a ger is someone, nowadays you use it as a ger as someone
It's
who's
a complete convert. Somebody who converts to Judaism is considered a Jew for all intents and purposes, for everything. They have the same commandments I do. They marry. They can, as far as for a convert who's a man, he can marry any woman, any Jewish woman. And for a woman, she can marry anybody except a Kohen. Kohen are the priests. And they were not allowed to marry certain women. One of the categories is divorcees, and the another one is a convert. Which makes it really difficult for older converts who either have never been married or got divorced. If you're 50 years old and you can't marry another divorcee, and you can't marry a convert, like, okay, what do you do now? So, I'm sorry, what you were saying?
Moshe married Zipporah, right?
Yeah, he was not a Cohen.
Yeah, but it calls him a
So
Cohen.
first of all, he's not a Cohen. First of all, he's not a Cohen. He's not a Cohen by lineage. Secondly, this is before the Torah was given. So things that happened before the Torah was given were not under the same rules. They did practice the Torah to a large extent, but they would vary from it on occasion. Yaakov married 2 sisters, which you're not allowed to do under Torah law, but he married them before the Torah was given.
Okay.
And when he came back into the land of Israel, one of them died because the land of Israel is holier than other places, and to be married to 2 sisters in the land of Israel was apparently not something that was okay. But he had his reasons to do it, and certainly he had holy progeny from her, Yosef and Binyamin. So there is another term that is used called ger toshav, which you do see from time to time, but is not used much. Okay, in order to get into what is a ger toshav, first I have to do the 7 laws of Noah. So a convert is a complete Jewish person who converted. We don't have, there used to be prohibitions in the Torah that spells out prohibitions on certain people converting to Judaism. Now we don't have any such prohibitions. They have to accept all of the mitzvot. They have to accept the basic beliefs. And when we say accept all the mitzvot, they accept that they're obligated to them. Whether there may be things that they don't do, just as on an individual level. Usually usually they try to limit that to only things that the community in general isn't very good about. For instance, if they speak Lashon Hara, you're not going to say, hey, you can't convert, and you go, well, everybody here speaks Lashon Hara.
What's Lashon?
Gossip, slander, that sort of. It's a specific category of sin that's about gossip, basically.
Okay.
That your Lashon Hara is something which is negative and true. Right?
Okay. All right.
So if you say, one of the examples is let's say you're not let's say I bought a car and I really did get ripped off by this guy, right? And you're not in the market for a car. You're never going to buy a car, and even if you did, you wouldn't buy that model from like he was a Chevy dealer, and you'd never buy a Chevy. You're completely uninterested in Chevys. I cannot go and tell you how he cheated me, even if it's true. That's called Lashon Hara. There's a different category.
If I was
There's
going
a different
there,
category
then
if
you
it's
can
false.
inform me?
Huh?
If I was going there to buy a car.
If you say, hey, I'm in the market for a car and I'm thinking about going to Shlomo's, car lot, I could say no. Look, and I have to give you exact facts, and I'm not allowed to embellish anything. And it's not supposed to be like an opinion. It's supposed to be like, okay, I paid, he charged me this amount for this kind of car, and or he changed it from this amount to this amount, like as on the paperwork, and by the time I realized I'd already signed, and then I can tell you that, because you need to know that that's protecting yourself. But if I just tell you, then it's considered Lashon Hara.
Okay.
Okay, so ger toshav. Actually, you know what? With just outside, there are 7 laws that every non-Jew is obligated to fulfill. A ger toshav, we have 2 terms, and I'm going to go into what they are next. But we have 2 terms for it. One is ger toshav, and the other one is ben, or plural is b'nai Noach. This is technically the male term. There's bat Noach, whatever, but usually people talk about b'nai Noach as a group. Or they're also called in English Noahides or Noachides. Noachide. The difference between these two, as far as I know, is a ger toshav is someone who swears in front of a Jewish court that they are going to keep the 7 laws, and therefore they are allowed to live in the land of Israel. when the Jews took over the land of Israel from the 7 nations, they were offered, you can leave, you can become B'nai Noach, which means give up idolatry, or we're going to kill you. And those who so you had, and actually all 3 happened. There's a group that's mentioned up until we get to.
Are we talking about 1948?
No. I'm talking about in
when they,
under Joshua, when Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho.
When he went in and took the land. Okay.
Right.
Got it.
So
Gotcha.
when Joshua comes to fight the Battle of Jericho, so all 3 happened. There's a tribe called the Girgashim that is mentioned throughout the Torah as one of the nations who you're going to dispossess, or the Girgashim, and then all of a sudden they disappear. If you look through like Yeshua and stuff, they're not mentioned. There's a second group that called the Givonim, which was from this particular town, that came to Yeshua under false pretenses and said, "Oh, we're actually from this far off land, and we want to make a treaty with you." And he said, "Okay, well, you become B'nai Noach." And they said, "Oh yeah, we will. We swear to do that." And then he found out that they were really part of the 7 nations. And apparently they would have been able to make the same deal anyway, but because they did it this way, they were allowed to live, they were allowed to stay in their city. However, they got like the lowest jobs on the totem pole.
Cleaning the toilets.
Yeah, it was like water drawers and stuff like that. So, and then the rest of the nations decided to fight and lost. So, okay, the 7 laws of Noah. Up until, so Adam kicked out of the garden, he has basically one commandment at that time, which is don't eat from the tree. Well, now the tree's not around, so there's no real commandment to eat from the tree. A commandment has to be something that you could do, but you're not supposed to do. They treat us well. He gets kicked out, and he's given 6 commandments. Idolatry, don't do it. Blasphemy, and let's say murder. It has your spilling of blood, which would probably encompass other things. Certain sexual relations. Robbery. And then in order to enforce all this, they have to establish courts of law to specifically enforce these other laws. That would be a communal mitzvah. It wouldn't be on one individual. So these are the 6 laws that were given to Adam. They kind of just make sense.
Okay.
You can't commit idolatry. You can't blasphemy. Is, I think it's entails cursing God. Did I write down what it was? I had it somewhere. I can give you websites that talk more about what exactly the different distinctions are. But basically, you're not allowed, there's no mitzvah specifically to worship God, but you're not allowed to go and worship other gods.
Okay.
And there's no, and you can't curse God, I think is what blasphemy refers to.
And this probably comes from the oral Torah. I don't remember
Yeah,
anything
they
in the
derive
written
it.
Torah.
They derive it different ways from Psukim leading up to Noach. And for instance, the robbery is what the world was destroyed for in the times of Noach. So obviously, that's not something you're not allowed to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so, like I said, most of these are just common sense, anyways. Like you kind of would expect them. It's basically how do you run a civilized society that in this world.
Sure.
But these are the 6 that God gave to Adam, and if you were to keep these, then and you keep them with intention and stuff, you can earn a place in the world to come. The righteous of the non-Jews have a place in the world to come. You don't have to convert to Judaism, although it seems, I remember hearing somewhere, and I haven't been able to find it since, is that according to the Rambam, in order for it to count towards Olam Haba, you have to do this because you believe God gave them the Torah to Moses, and he commanded these things in there. And there are groups all over the country, all over the world now, that of non-Jews who don't intend to convert to Judaism, who go and learn these laws. And I forgot the seventh law. The seventh law comes after Noah. That's why it's called the B'nai Noach. Everybody on earth is a descendant of Noah because he survived the flood. So the last one is called, we'll just call it limb for short. It's limb from a living animal. Ever mina chai. The way I explain this is with a joke. This guy comes in and this one farmer comes and tells his friend, I have this incredible pig. He has a wooden leg and he can talk. The guy said, I don't believe you have a pig that can talk. It's like, no, you gotta see it. Come on, I'll show you. So he takes him and he shows him the pig. He says, Wilbur, say something. And Wilbur says, how are you today? The other farmer says, that's incredible. He says, but tell me something. Why does the pig have a wooden leg? He said, well, the pig that's smart, you don't eat them all at once. So that is what you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to hack off a limb from a living animal and eat it. As far as I know, this would also apply to eating any animal like while it's still living. For instance, I don't know if we do. For instance, I think there are certain animals in certain countries, especially, that they eat while they're alive. I think octopus in Japan, certain types, like certain kinds of octopus or whatever, they, like swallow it whole. You have to kill it first.
Right. Yeah.
There's a guy on TV. There's a show called Man vs. Wild, and I don't know if it's still running, but I've been watching it on Netflix. The guy goes out. He was with the British Special Forces, and he's an expert in survival. So he goes out into these crazy places and teaches you how to survive there. Go to like Alaska and the north of Scotland and the Sahara and everything. And every episode, he winds up like eating some disgusting like bug or grubs and stuff. And a lot of times he'll like bite that. Sometimes he'll bite the head off first and then kind of spit that out and then eat it. But if you just like crunch down on it or something without taking the head off first, that I think would count as ever mina chai. So that's the last one. Because at this point, up until Noach, everybody was vegetarian. And after Noach, we're given permission to eat meat. So now you have permission to eat meat, you have a restriction on eating meat. So, Chabad, which is a Jewish group that we'll go into when we get into the Mashiach, it's a particular type of Chassidus, particularly is into pushing this forward because they have a lot of dealings now with non-Jews, and up until very recently, this generation, you couldn't have told non-Jews, oh hey, there's a set of rules out there specifically for non-Jews. You just don't want to take them off. So it's amazing what has happened in this generation. This is basically, like I said, the basics of running a decent society. In a one God world. If a non-Jew commits themselves to this and wants to study Torah that's related to these things, then, like I said, they earn more and more reward in the world to come. They're doing, what they were created for. That's the whole idea. Is the Jews would have 613 commandments and basically lead the rest of the world in doing these 7. They can also convert. And as I said, we have a lot of converts in Atlanta. It takes somewhere in the order of 4 years, starting from scratch, to convert. And once you do, then you become a full Jew like the rest of us. And everything that, any benefit that I have and any obligation I have, they have the exact same one. There's A good friend of ours actually just wrote me yesterday from he married, Jewish woman. They have Jewish kids. They live in Israel now. He, was able to get in, has Jewish stamped on his passport, everything. There's another guy. There's actually a black guy who lives here. They just made Aliyah, which is the term for immigrating to Israel for anybody on video, and has been learning in a yeshiva, a religious school for adults. He's been there for a year, and he's going back for his second year now, and he's committed to staying in Israel and being an Israeli, which will be funny to see in a few years. They tried to deport him though. They thought he was an African infiltrator. He's like, listen to the way I talk. Did they speak English like this? And he was like, oh, I don't believe you. So he had to get his friend to go. He had to like call his roommate at yeshiva to bring his passport because he didn't bring his passport and everything. They're like, no, go in the van. And he's like, no, I'm not going into any van. Okay, yeah, go ahead. You have a question? You can find out lots about this on the internet.
Okay.
And there's groups dedicated to it all over the world now.
Oh, didn't you make the comment one time that at Beth Jacob there were a lot of converts? Or
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Both Beth Jacob and Young Israel do conversions. As far as I know, they're the only two in Atlanta that do.
Of the Orthodox?
Of the Orthodox synagogues. If you go to REL and you say, I'd like to convert, they'll probably say that you need to go to Beth Jacob, not here.
Okay, so I didn't realize that there were synagogues or whatever, rabbis or congregations that didn't convert. But there
Oh yeah, lots of them. There is nothing in it for the rabbi or for the court. There's nothing. If a convert then goes and reverts back to what they did before, they stay Jewish, and then everything they do is your fault because you made them Jewish. If you don't do anything, then you just didn't do anything. So there's really no upside for them.
Right. Okay. But doesn't it sort of go against what's spoken about in the Torah?
No, there's a command about if somebody comes. There's commandments about if somebody converts, this is how it's done. There's nothing that says you have to take them, and for sure they don't. And now on the flip side, several of the greatest Jewish leaders have been either converts or descendants of converts. It mentions in the Mishnah, it lists all the people who were basically the direct pathway of Torah, like the Torah leaders of every generation. And in the middle are two converts. Rabbi Akiva, who's very famous, I believe his parents were converts.
Okay.
So, like on the one hand, you have Ruth, who's the great grandmother of King David. You have there's another one, Naomi, who I forget what her.
No, Naomi was the mother-in-law of Ruth.
No, not Naomi. Naamah, I think was the other one who was an Ammonitess or something like that. Yeah, you have. But you have a lot of. You have Rachav who married Yeshua. You have a lot of converts, but there's no particular. There's no obligation to take them. And certainly, it's perfectly permissible and preferable for a non-Jew to stay a non-Jew and become a Ben Noah. Okay.
But Benai, is that what you, Benai Noah?
Benai.
What's Ben is just son, right? Son and
Yeah.
Noah? Benai, what's that?
Right.
Is that
Ben is son. Banim are sons or children. Benai are sons of something else. You have B'nai Torah, you have B'nai, there's, B'nai Torah is the same over here. You have B'nai Mitzvah, if you have two boys getting bar mitzvah on the same day. Or just, you have two bar mitzvah kids who are standing in front of you, B'nai Mitzvah. Children.
Okay.
It means children of. It's a construct form.
Okay.
Sometimes in Hebrew you can drop the of. So like a ben Torah is a son of Torah. You know, a bar mitzvah is that's Aramaic, but it's the son of Torah of mitzvah. Okay, we should probably call it here. Next week we'll do heaven and hell and more about the sins, which I thought about going into after last week's class, but of course that's all assuming there is a next week's class, because it's a awful long way to come for one student who doesn't even go to Georgia Tech. So we're going to try and get in touch with the other people, see if they're coming.
So if you can't get anybody, then we may scratch it.
For sure.
Okay.
However, I don't particularly want to leave you hanging. What I'm thinking is if we could come up with some way of doing it in my neighborhood.
Yeah, maybe somewhere closer.
Maybe just meet at like the Starbucks.
That would be cool. Okay.
To have a place to meet.
Okay.
Because I'm not doing it through the shul, through Beth Jacob or anything, so I wouldn't want to ask them for a room or anything.
Hey Bobby, if I want to.
Although actually maybe, you know what, well no, I don't think it would. I was thinking there